So everyone, fellow Kryptonians out there, welcome to my Superman and Lois series finale recap, review, and breakdown. And that was an emotional roller coaster. I mean, I knew I'd get emotional, but given how much time they left to wrap everything up at the end, God damn you guys should have seen me 10 minutes ago. I was in tears, to say the least. So I don't want to waste any time. Let's just get straight into this. Let me know all of your thoughts about how they wrapped up the entire series of Superman and Lois down in the comments below. But let's go through the events of this episode because things got pretty crazy. So right away, guys, we pick up with Lana and John Henry Irons at a bar trying to date, but he's been very busy. I think they've been on 4 dates in over a long period of time, but they're interrupted by Doomsday laying waste to Smallville. Now I totally forgot that John Henry Irons and Lana were a thing, and I guess that was a bit of a commentary on that since we haven't really seen them together so much, and I guess that's because, the roles in the cast got cut down a little bit this season, but they wanted to remind us, especially for the flash forward later on, that they're most certainly still a thing. Now, in this moment, John Henry Irons gets wrecked in an explosion, and speaking of, you just see Doomsday stamping on Superman. So, from this moment onwards, the episode is about to gear up to continue that fight. And speaking of, the next scene after this, the fight with Superman and Doomsday continues, and he's getting smashed and smashed. But in this moment, we have Jonathan and Jordan smack Doomsday off of him, which I thought was pretty cool because, combined together, they have enough strength to do something like that. And as you guys may know, if you watched my last week's review, I genuinely wasn't sure if Jonathan and Jordan were going to get involved hand to hand with Doomsday. I mean, they don't, but they kind of do. Now, Lois tells the boys that they have to help their dad, and they said they tried, but he won't let us. And you can understand where Clark's coming from. He doesn't want to put them in danger. I mean, after all, Doomsday killed Superman. So as a father, the last thing you'd want would be 2 teenagers who don't have enough experience, let alone not really being ready to face such a monster like this. And so in this moment, they both use their heat vision combined to go up against Doomsday, and then they fly off to distract him so Superman can get a breather. Now, Lois wakes up Clark, and they argue just a little bit about the boys, Clark thinking they're not ready, everything we basically just said, but Lois says that they have each other, and that's got to be enough, and you need to accept that you just can't do this on your own anymore. And I wasn't sure if this was going to lead to a proper tag team situation with Superman, John Henry, both boys just going left, right, center, punching Doomsday. It didn't exactly lead to that, which is probably a good thing, but it was still nice Clark being yeah, maybe you're right. They can do something here. So when we cut back to the boys, they're flying through a forest with Doomsday pursuing them, and Clark tells them to lure the Thing to Main Street. Now, some of you may view this as a nitpick, whatever, but I do have to bring it up. Not to be a party pooper here, but I was thinking in this moment, maybe some of you were as well, surely Clark would want to take the fight outside of Smallville as to, not risk anyone's lives or any further damage to the structure of Main Street and whatnot, because one could argue Clark could have just flown somewhere nearby that forest, and then, they could have done the exact same tactic with the boys, flying towards Superman, and then the hammer going to Doomsday's face, just out there. Clark could have flown John Henry with him. Just a teeny tiny little, I guess, nitpick, if you will, because I do feel like Superman would minimize the damage, and it's true that plan could have been executed in that way as well. But anyway, as the boys approach, we get an amazing shot of Superman, just standing there, and then we get the slow-mo of Superman dodging Doomsday's punch just millimeters away from his face, and then John Henry Irons' hammer comes flying in to smash Doomsday in the face, and all I wrote in my notes at this point was just hell yeah. And so in this moment, Doomsday is out for the count and dead. for now. And this is when Clark thinks to take Doomsday to the sun, as it doesn't really heal from the sun like Clark does, because we can't forget that, of course, Doomsday is still Bizarro Superman, so the sun makes him weak, whereas on this Earth, it makes Superman strong. Now, the only thing I had to say here, again, sure, view this as a nitpick, and to people who get annoyed about this, you're watching a review. It doesn't mean I dislike this episode, it's just stuff or critique that I'm just going to bring up. Just had to put that out there, because there's always somebody. The only thing I thought of in this moment is that Clark killed Doomsday before in that previous fight. If you guys remember, he used one of his own, like, shards coming off of his body to stab him in space. And he came back very, very, very rapidly. So it was quite lucky that he was staying dead for this amount of time for Clark to fly him to the sun. Not a major deal, just, again, another thing that I noticed. And now, this is when we had Superman flying to the sun. Now, this is when Doomsday comes back to life right as he's about to go in the sun. And Clark is like getting ready to face him. Like, oh, God damn it, I was so close. And he's coming back right now. But Doomsday holds his hand out and his eyes glow blue, matching that of the Bizarro Clark. And he's allowing himself to die and he starts disintegrating. Now, I just choose to believe here that due to the sun weakening Doomsday, again, given what we know about Bizarro, it depowers him, that he came to his senses in the beauty of the beast kind of way, and how he did with Lois earlier on this season. Because I was thinking, wait for a second, why does he come back to himself now after having agreed to kill Superman after Luthor evolved him into the final Doomsday form? But yeah, like for the sake of the episode, I'm just going to put it down to maybe the sun just knocked him back to his senses. And either way, I'm not saying this lessened the moment for me. I thought it was a very beautiful moment, one that I didn't actually see coming. I mean, we were predicting, could Doomsday turn against Luthor, the Master, and try and kill him and then sacrifice himself? But it was done, obviously, quite a bit differently here. But why do you think, logistically, like actual in-law reasons, Doomsday changed his mind after already having committed to kill Superman? Do you think that it was the sun as well? Maybe like making him less rageful since he was depowered, and so he was like, no, wait, I don't want to be doing this. And then he decided to chuck himself into the sun. But either way, after this, Clark starts to heal from the sun's energy. We have Lois, John Henry, Lana, and the boys now kind of thinking about Luthor, being like, yeah, since he realizes that thing's gone, he's going to come after all of us, like everyone. And that's because Luthor doesn't leave loose ends, so he genuinely might go on a bit of a murdering spree here, because clearly, he won't want any witnesses to his involvement with everything going down in Smallville, otherwise he would just end up in prison again. And so, in this moment, they're like, okay, well, let's get Amanda to turn against Luthor, since she's, definitely more on our side now than she ever has been before, which is when Lex calls Amanda, saying that he expects loyalty, and she kind of has a go at him, saying she's gonna resign, and, Luthor is right behind her in the car, and he sends a missile at it, and the boys conveniently arrive just in time to save her. Now, this gets us to the next stage of Lois's plan, and that's to use Amanda to tell the world about the truth of Luthor over the air. But Amanda's pretty cautious because she's like, well, that suit is upgraded and he's going to be coming after us any second now. So Lois starts streaming with Lana being the cameraman, and the network goes down, thanks to Milton, which means Lex is coming. So now it's time for the boys to step up and prevent Luthor from killing everyone, and immediately Jonathan gets zapped with some kind of laser and gets launched away, and Jordan gets choked by Luthor. Now, Luthor is like pure maniac mode now, calling him weak and worthless, just like his mother, but Lois comes out to confront him and kind of taunt him, and in this moment, I spotted what she had in her hand, so she probably felt a bit confident because she knew she had something, and she smacks it onto his chest, and it blows up, and luckily damages the suit, just that little bit to give Superman an extra fighting chance to actually, be able to take on Luthor in such an upgraded Warsuit. Now, just as Luthor is flexing that Lois can't stop him, Superman arrives to take him out. And so in this moment, we have our first live-action versus Warsuited Lex Luthor scene go down. Now, I was really, really hoping, I'm not like saying this is points down on the score for the review, not that I give scores anyway, because I kind of feel like it's reductive and it doesn't give enough, substance to a review. But I was hoping that that the kryptonite coating on the Warsuit would make it glow green at one point, just in terms of how, let's just say Luthor was in the air and he presses a button and then it just starts glowing green because of how much of an upgraded Kryptonian coating the suit got. And that way it'd be a bit more comic book accurate, but they didn't do that. I felt like that was, just being honest here, a bit of a missed opportunity. Not that I'm really complaining, because I felt like this finale was freaking awesome, but let me know if you agree with me there. And this is where Luthor launches the kryptonite screws into Clark, and they start drilling their way in, and it looked really bad. And if you guys remember me saying in my last review, I wasn't sure how they were going to handle this, because Clark seemed to be really struggling with trying to take them out, but he musters every little bit of strength that he has, and he manages to actually do it. Now, Jordan, in this moment, after Jonathan got wiped out, can't hear his heartbeat in this moment, and so he goes after him, and he has to perform CPR. Now, that must have been one hell of a hit he received to basically die. Jordan actually managed to resuscitate his brother after, like, super speeding the CPR, and then, like, a little, I don't know what you want to call it, a little Kryptonian explosion happened as he came back to life. I don't know what that was really meant to mean, but hey, it was pretty cool. But this was a very touching moment between the boys, especially when Jordan says, "Please don't leave me," and Jonathan was like, "I promise I won't." That was like a bit of a, not like a mad tearjerker, but it did get to me quite a bit. In the meantime, we have John Henry confront Milton and basically arrest him. And this is when Clark finishes Luthor. And I mean, you know, we saw quite a bit of this in the trailer, to be honest, but Tyler Hoechlin was just incredible. The way he delivered the lines of saying he'll never hurt another person again, every single time, like punching Luthor like 10 miles back, and then Luthor would come back every time to try and get another punch in, only to be sent back another 20 miles. And then when Clark does that last punch, it completely decimates Luthor's Warsuit. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of surprised it didn't kill him, because that punch, you know, that could have completely obliterated his ribs and, well, every bone in his body. And they both arrive back down on Main Street, and it's finally over. And at this point, I kind of hovered my mouse over the episode like bar, if you will, and I was like, wait, what, there's like still 20 odd minutes left? And then before you know it, on screen, 1 year later, and in my notes I literally wrote one year later. Holy crap, did not really expect that. But as for my thoughts on the fight, I really enjoyed the way they handled it. Obviously, like, CGI this season doesn't feel as like polished as it does in previous seasons. I've seen a lot of people say that, but for me, I really don't mind that, given the, you know, limitations that this season had, and I still feel like they did everything they could to make it look as good as it did, considering what they were working with. The only thing I would say that I would have wanted to see is literally like a green glowing Lex Warsuit, and that being one of the upgrades that Milton Fine gave to it. But anyway, we've still got quite a bit to talk about here. We cut to 1 year later, and Lana is getting married to John Henry. Now, this is where the emotions really start flowing. We have Clark walking Lana down the aisle. We even have Chrissy and Kyle's baby there, and she's got another one on the way. And the words from Lois, like marrying them, while we got those flashbacks to just great moments from previous seasons, were already getting me quite emotional. I didn't really think I would for like Lana and John Henry, but again, the way they edited in like really cool moments that I haven't seen in years. Like, I haven't watched season 1 in a long time. It was just like a nice execution of like paying homage to the years of Superman and Lois. And I just thought it was quite nice that they both found each other and ended up getting married. So we get that little scene between Clark and Lois, wondering about, you know, what do you think Superman and Lois Lane will be remembered for? Truth, justice, and a better tomorrow. Couldn't have said it better myself. And Lois gets a message saying that Luthor's appeal has been denied, and he is heading to Strikers for life. And I love how they cut back to Luthor in prison, like assuming that he's going to get the same arrangements that he had on his last day. And if you guys remember, he had like the king's life in prison. He was sitting on other inmates as like a chair. But we heard from, I believe it was the warden, saying that, well, that won't be possible. Things have changed around here, and that's because Bruno Mannheim turns out to be in the position that Lex was in, and even taunts him that Luthor is going to make a hell of a chair. This is where things really wrap up. We hear Clark just kind of talking about how the rest of his life went, and he says that thanks to Sam's sacrifice and his heart, he lived for another 32 years. We get to see what Lois and Clark were up to. So, like, Superman can still be Superman, I guess, for only so much time, obviously, because we do know, as John Henry Irons said, that he would lose his powers, maybe not this year, but maybe sometime later this decade. But on top of just, like, doing some saves, but mostly leaving his legacy over to the boys to do the superhero saving, him and Lois started a foundation. And you see all of these newspaper reports of Lois, you know, giving, like, speeches to thousands gathered in Metropolis, Superman feeding the homeless. There was a Sam Lane medical center that was started, and they got Bruno Mannheim's help because despite how dodgy Mannheim was, he had good ideas for bettering, you know, life for people. So that's how they started working together. And before I forget, how could I almost forget? We got an amazing shot of Superman, both of his sons in their suits, and we have Steel with the comic book accurate Superman logo there, even the red cape. We have Nat there in her suit with the Superman logo. This was a great shot. I was hoping, and I did say in the previous review, I hoped that we would get a bit more from those suits, but then again, if they kind of just randomly made them up, you know, earlier on in the episode, just so they could, like, fight Doomsday, that would have just been, like, so awkwardly contrived for the sake of fan service. So, you know, this was a nice way to, like, show their superhero suits. And then we get to see an older Lois and Clark. And I loved how, and Bitsy Tulloch said this anyway, that she deliberately went with the bangs to give a bit of a Margot Kidder look, which I thought was a really nice tribute there. And then we see the older Jonathan and Jordan, with Jonathan's older casting being Elizabeth Tulloch's husband. And you guys may know him from the series Grimm. He played Nick Burkhart, I believe it was. I watched that years and years ago now. I remember people were thinking that he could cameo as Bruce Wayne or Batman, but I was like, you know, would they really bring in a Batman cameo just at the end of this, like, randomly? So yeah, either way, thought that was really, really cool. We learned that both John and Jordan got married, had kids, actually tons of kids, as we see. Now, I don't know, probably not, by the way, if that was meant to actually be Jonathan's girlfriend and, you know, was Jordan married to Sarah, but these were older versions of them. That was never made clear. I don't think they were anyway. I mean, you know, those are teenage romances. Maybe Jonathan ended up with an older, what was her name? Candace. But it's not like they have to be with those people, because at this point in time, they're clearly much, much older and could have ended up with completely different people. But in this moment, with all those kids, I was like, God damn, imagine all of these Kryptonian powers manifesting in all of these children. And this is where the episode actually made me weep, because we get to the point in Lois and Clark's lives where they've lived, you know, many decades into the future, and Lois's cancer came back. And just seeing Tyler Hoechlin, like, act as Clark here, you know, with her dying breaths, it just crushed me. It was so well done. At the same time, I was thinking, well, at least they lived a full life together after the events of Luthor. But hearing him say, everything good in my life came from you, it makes me almost tear up, like, right now. It's just, it really, 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 really got me. You know, just after the context of seeing all the seasons of the show, how good these two are together, and just a casting and, you know, on screen, seeing everything they've gone through, getting to this point and where, yeah, you know, they've lived happy lives, but nonetheless, it's not going to be easy to see your wife pass away in front of you, especially knowing that Clark lived quite a few years after this, well, not all alone, but we'll get to that in a second. But as he says, in that moment as she passed, she said something that I'll never forget. She saw Sam Lane, which I guess alludes to a little bit more of that afterlife that we saw in just a few moments' time. Now, after that, as Clark said, it was never the same. Friends would check up on him. We see Lana baked him a pie. All of this is very wholesome stuff. Jordan and Jonathan came by almost every day. Pretty easy to do, right, when they can fly. But it did still break my heart a little bit, knowing that Clark was all alone. So it broke my heart even more in, like, in a happy way, when he said that, you know, life still just felt like less when she wasn't there. And so Clark got a dog. And he says, like, seriously, how have I never had a dog before? And he named it Crypto. And as he said, the years I had with Crypto. So he was alive for another, like, what, 2, 3, 4, 5 years without Lois, give or take. And then one day, when Clark was walking Crypto in Smallville, just like that, his heart gave out, as he said, almost exactly where his dad died. But thanks to Kyle, he didn't exactly die right there and then. but his time was running out. So at least he got like another moment similar to Lois, where he was in bed and the boys were there, watching him pass away. And as he says, the second time I died, it was so much different than the first. He says this time it was amazing. And he literally like steps out of himself as his younger self. And I guess, again, this is like their iteration of what their afterlife looks like, because I guess it's subjective to like who you are, I suppose. And it's also like the lost ending in a way. Like Clark is seeing what he remembers most at, I guess, the most key point in his life in this version of heaven. So instead of his kids being older, Jonathan and Jordan, they are the younger selves that, you know, we've spent time with in all of this season. Yet we also saw all their grandkids there, but then again, in Clark's mind, they exist, and that's the age that they're at. But they also even had Luthor there, which I did think this was a nice touch, because what this final closing scene and narration from Clark Kent's Superman was about was really just narrating everything that Superman stands for, which it's just, this is why this show just gets it. I could speak for 24 hours in a row talking about why Superman and Lois is my favorite iteration of Superman and Lois, because at the core substance, it's done a better job than any Superman out there, in my opinion, that really just brings to fruition that source material version of that character. It's just at a different point in his life, because most, you know, iterations we get or have got or we're going to get, like David Corenswet, are at like an earlier period of Superman's life. So don't get me wrong, it's a different like period of time, you know, when they have kids, they're like teenagers, but either way, it's still the most Superman substance I've ever connected to, and why it remains my favorite, and probably will do for a long time, unless, you know, somehow David Corenswet tops it. But yeah, back to Lex. As Clark is narrating, saying, you know, joy, hope, and then forgiveness, we see Luthor there, and he's just weeping, and it's probably because he's just he's destroyed his own life, and it could have gone very different. He didn't have to do what he did. He could have chose to have a life getting closer to his daughter again, but he chose a different path. But Clark in this moment compassionately puts his hand on his shoulder and forgives him. We then have wonder with Krypto, friendship with Chrissy and Kyle, family with Lana and John, and then lastly, guys, love. And then the door opens and Lois is in a red dress, and as he says, you know, with regards to love, to give it, to hold on to it, because life, it goes by so fast. And I think, you know, everything that we heard during this scene, it's also just a lesson that everyone can take away from this. Is sure, maybe a bit of a cliche, but it is something very, very true. And when you're already connected to a show like this, and you have that kind of emotional synergy with it, hearing that message is really important, because it makes you think for a minute. And, you know, it feels like 1 second ago, I was covering Gotham season 3 on this channel like 6+ years ago, and here I am at 30 years old, about to get married in just 2 days time, and I feel like my life is going fast. Now, this isn't, you know, I bet there's some older people on the channel being like, you know nothing, just you wait till you hit 43 or 48 or something. I'm not saying that. The sentiment is the same. Do you know what I mean? Life goes by really fast, and the way that they really poetically and very caringly executed this back half of the episode was just so special, and I don't think it could have really have been a better ending for the show, and I truly mean that. And then it cuts to the Superman and Lois title screen, and there it is, the end of the entire show. But man, it really put me through the ringer, but in the best kind of way. It's quite rare to get a show ending in such a beautiful way, and I'm very grateful that they got this 4th season, and they told a really good season as well. Like, don't get me wrong, they only had like 10 episodes to do it in, and sure, they would have tackled this, that, and the other, because they were originally meant to go for 7 seasons, but still, they pulled it off exceptionally well. And how lucky are we that we got such a good ending to this version of Lois and Clark. It's truly tremendous. And again, I could just keep going around in circles here, but I guess I've said it all. It was such a heartbreaking yet heartwarming, wholesome, gorgeous and beautiful ending, and I couldn't be happier as a Superman and Lois fan. So with that being said, guys, that's it for the Superman and Lois reviews on this channel. Thank you to all of you who have been watching these reviews for like the past, what, like four plus years, I guess, which is just insane. I would love to know what you thought about this finale. What was your favorite moment? How do you feel about it truly ending? Do you feel like they pulled it off? I'd be so hard-pressed to believe if you didn't think they did. But yeah, I'm just kind of stalling at this point. If you liked this video, would really appreciate your support by leaving a like on the final Superman and Lois review that we're ever going to do on this channel. Stay subscribed, or subscribe if you haven't already, because I'm sure there's going to be many other videos that you enjoy on this channel, coverage of the future Superman movie and the DCU and everything like that. But guys, for the last time in the Superman and Lois reviews, I'm going to love you and leave you. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow Kryptonians in the next video. Goodbye.